Hey there, gang. So recently, the developers announced that they are possibly considering making some changes to Clown on the next PTB. And given a lot of the vocal criticism that I've been seeing online, I thought it would be appropriate for me to again rebuff my thoughts on Clown, even though I did just make a video about it, because I want to give y'all again some updated thoughts of mine on the state of Clown, and I want to also kind of address those concerns that people may have to again provide perspective that some people might still possibly be lacking. Because one thing that I do notice when it comes to how people look at Clown nowadays, they see him as miles beyond where he was pre-PTB, when again, all that really changed when it comes to how he was able to take advantage of his yellow bottles compared to pre-PTB is that they are 2% faster, and he's able to initially pick it up much sooner, right? He gets the activation timer was cut in half, but when it comes to refreshing the yellow bottle, you very well could do that within the means of the previous activation timer while it was still in effect. This meant that you didn't have to worry about eclipsing the timers and thus not getting the most efficiency out of it, right? The activation timer didn't really help with that. And thus, when you actually compare the state of Clown pre-PTB to post-PTB, it was very, very exaggerated. But I want to kind of, take a look at some of the things that some people were saying, most notably, right, when it comes to just the mobility. Some people were saying that Clown's mobility is on the level of an S-tier killer. I have quite literally seen multiple people compare Clown to Blight. That is just insane. Absolutely just nonsensical. There is literally no math behind that. There is no sense behind that. That's not an insult to the people. I know to a lot of people that play this game casually, they are just speaking from perspective. And let's be honest, gang, if you are casual Joe, casual Bob, casual Susie, and you have like 400 hours on DBD over the course of multiple years or whatever have you, even regardless of irrespective to the time, you are someone who doesn't take this game very seriously. You don't know the difference between a 4-lane or an LT, right? You see post-PTB Clown hasted up coming at you, and maybe to you, it might as well be Blight, even if it's really not. I would have really, really emphasized how ridiculous that claim is, and we will be getting into that in a minute. But that is basically something that still matters regardless of how wrong that perspective is. Because again, right, with how I've talked about with how this game is balanced and designed, it is that perspective which guides the balancing and development of this game, because it is overall what motivates people to still play it. If people see Clown as Blight, even if he's literally not, right, and they don't play the game because of it, well, there you go. That's a problem. That's a problem that needs to be solved. Even if, right, the problem was created as the result of the developers trying to fix another previous problem, which was pulling Clown players away from only using those pink bottles. Instead, what we've got are Clown players using pretty much for the most part only their yellow bottles, and we'll be looking at the reasons for that as well as my solutions. But that is basically going to be the topic of today's discussion. I've got a presentation for you guys with a really nice breakdown. I've also got just a little nice kind of match highlight to kind of just talk about Chase when it comes to Clown post PTB. But that is when it comes to just Clown in general, right? I do want to emphasize that Clown is not where a lot of people think he is. And that does matter because even though perspective is what guides the development, at the end of the day, it is the objective reality of the killer itself, which is why people will play them, right? So using the other video as an example, when we looked at how the developers nerfed the numbers on his bottles to the point where it was like I couldn't even get a hit around a Killer Shack corner check spot before they made it to a window or a pallet using both my yellow and pink bottles together. That is objective, right? It doesn't matter, even though not only does it feel like shit for one thing, me being on that end, but also just the sheer state of that. If I can't do something, that is going to be why I also don't play the killer. So that is something the developers, I'm sure, also are taking into account, but they definitely need to. This isn't a matter of just nerf Clown's bottles, right? If you nerf Clown objectively, if you don't actually take respect for the numbers that I've done throughout multiple of these videos, then you will break this killer. Because again, right, he is not above where people is or where they think he is. And why is that? Let me briefly talk about that. A lot of people, they look at Clown as this Blight mobility killer, and this comes from the fact that they treat him as they treated him pre-PTB. They don't pre-run, they don't make the most use of their time when they're not actively engaged with them in chase, which is working on generators, if not the core generators. They're not making the most use out of their hook timers, right? You've got 70 seconds before a survivor goes to the next stage. That's plenty of time to just get free generator progress before you go for your unhooks. I don't think I mentioned pre-running, and that's another thing too, right? If you are getting focused by Clown, it's very, very easy to just simply run early when you hear his terror radius. Hasted up or not, you should be actively paying attention to that. You should be using your HUD to recognize when or not he's in chase. And the moment that you even get the possibility, the game sense, or even just the in-game indication that he is heading in your direction, you should be utilizing the fact that you can, by virtue of hearing the terror radius, right, or whatever have you, even if it's just seeing with your eyes, create distance, extend the time that he has to commit. Because Clown has to make a decision at the end of the day. You know, he doesn't just spawn out of the ether on top of you. He's not Freddy, right? Clown has to actively walk his ass to you. If he's going to use yellow bottles to do that, it'll send him behind on that. He's still going to have to reload. At the end of the day, it's still seconds added onto your chase. It's still going to pull him away from the other stuff he's got to do, right? When it comes to both defending generators, proxying his hook. So pre-running especially hinders his ability to do that as well, no pun intended. And that's basically what I'm getting at when it comes to why, again, right, in my own previous video and even now, I don't view Clown as some very high tier ridiculous killer. He's still very much mid-level. So now let's go ahead and transition over to this little document that I have, and we're just going to kind of break down, like I said, my thoughts on how the developers can approach changing Clown on the upcoming PTB in a way that will make him fun to play, will make him less unfun to play against, I should say, because let's be honest, gang, no survivors, or I think for the most part, very few survivors are ever going to find Clown actually fun to play against. But overall, things that I consider would be a better change for Clown overall as a whole. Alrighty, so like I just said, I've got this little mock-up for you guys, ways that I think will make Clown healthier for both sides in DBD. And, you know, first things first, going through here, as I was talking about at the start of the video, I would do what's called debunking the BS. Clown literally being as fast as Blight. Oh my gosh, he's so fast. Again, right, I know it's perspective, but I hope it really remains as that for just most people, right? And that they are able to see the nonsensical nature again of that claim, because it is just blatantly untrue. Let me kind of move my camera over here if I'm kind of in the way. As y'all can see, right, literally you can look at the numbers, you can Google this yourself. Clown, it moves at like 5.1 to maybe like 5.3 meters per second if you're using his bonus Invigoration add-ons, the cheap gin bottle and sticky soda bottle. But Blight rushes at 9.2 meters per second. Y'all, that means that Clown is moving on average something like 56 to maybe like closer at best 60% of the speed that Blight rushes, right? And it's only around that with the add-ons. So without it, it's maybe like 55, 56%. So really, really think about that, right? Blight's got 5 charges. He's able to maintain a single rush, I believe, for around the same time as Clown's yellow bottle. He is able to go literally almost double the distance because of that. So this idea that Clown has the mobility of Blight is literally in the same way as if saying that a survivor walks at the same speed that they run. Really, really think about how ridiculous that is, because I believe the walking speed is around that same ratio. It's literally like 2.2, 2.3, I believe, something like that, meters per second. And when you factor in that a survivor runs at like 4 meters per second, like what if we just took survivors running movement speed and we just capped it to 56% of what it is at base? I mean, after all, gang, if Clown is literally as fast as Blight, then surely what that will mean is that effectively, if we were to cap survivor movement speed to 56% of what it is at base, then it's not really doing anything at all to how much distance they make, right? Right? That's literally what one would say based on this, on the logic that is used here when people compare Clown to Blight, and that is why it is so ridiculous. Anyone who genuinely believes that Clown has actual similar levels of mobility to Blight, when you look at these numbers and you consider the factors of the powers as well themselves, it is just blatant intellectual dishonesty or ignorance. There is really no other way to phrase it, because you either just simply don't know better, or you are trying to paint a narrative that is not true simply for the purpose of just either being upset because you don't like the killer. Either way, you're trying to push for an agenda that isn't based in fact or grounded in reality. And that's a problem, right? This would be literally like saying if killer players, imagine if killer players were trying to suggest, all types of nonsensical changes that were literally beyond the realm of what survivors could deal with. You very well could expect survivors to have pushback on that, right? Especially with fact, you know, things like if we were, imagine if killer players were to say that gen times need to be doubled. You know, gen times need to be doubled because they basically at best are some types of, you know what I mean? Things that ultimately just, again, not grounded in reality. There's no purpose for that, again, besides intellectual dishonesty. And that is why I wanted to take some time to talk about this here. You know, again, you can confirm this yourself by checking it out in the wiki. Next, what I want to look at, again, right, previously, might have to move myself up, it feels like, with each and every slide here, gang. I'll probably just shrink myself down here a bit, too. Don't mind me with this, give me a sec. Anyways, gang, just like with pre-PTB, post-PTB also has two main issues. And what's kind of funny is they're very similar to the issues that Clown had, right? Pre-PTB, but kind of inverted. So just like pre-PTB, the first issue that Clown has post-PTB is that the Invigoration bottles are too universally dominant, which just like beforehand, right, you can just get away without using your pink bottles. You can just throw your yellow bottles at your feet, you haste yourself up, and by virtue of the fact especially that a lot of survivors counter Clown like they would pre-PTB, which means that which isn't actually a counter. Again, I want to clarify. They're not pre-running. You know, they're not effectively working on generators, this or that. Sometimes, a lot of the times, they're greeting. They're not dropping pallets, so they're just giving them the Clown player free hits. All of this stuff just ultimately culminating is in why Clown doesn't need both of his bottles. Because when you look at the numbers, again, it's only 2% stronger haste at base. You could have achieved this 2% as well pre-PTB using an add-on. It is only simply the activation timer, the fact that Clown players are hasting themselves up more in general, the fact that because of the fact that the activation timer is shorter, they're able to maintain that easier given their capacity. Because, I mean, let's be honest, gang, this isn't a denigration when I refer to capacity. The reason why the Invigoration timer had to get cut to begin with is because for people that didn't play the killer right in a dedicated fashion, they only played him casually, they didn't have the capacity to figure out how to utilize the bottles properly, right? That was literally the whole reason why we had this change to begin with. So the yellow bottles could be used by people who didn't just main the killer in a dedicated way. So there we go, you know, and that is why we're at where we're at. Because even though the yellow bottles are really easy to use, right, which is why they are universally dominant given how people are responding to them inappropriately, they're not pre-running, etc., where we're at right now is why it's only the yellow bottles. Point number two is because the intoxication bottles expire too quickly. It's not really, you're not encouraged to use them mid-chase. Because think about this, 1 second hindered for 14%, right? You slow them down by 14% for 1 second. You have to factor in ping. You have to factor in that there's a bottle swap cooldown. You have to factor in that Clown, after throwing a bottle, has to wait before he can swing, right? All of this stuff together, also because of the bottle swap, you have to consider that by throwing a pink, if the pink was ineffectual, that pink could have been a yellow, and thus, in turn, you would get more out of the haste because maybe the haste is much easier to use, both because of the faster activation timer, but also because of the fact that since the haste was nerfed in such a fashion that it's very, you probably have to be more technical to get the most out of it by compared to a yellow, given what the yellow is compared to a pink on a 1-to-1, right? 12% haste for 6 seconds, almost activated immediately versus 14% hindered for 1 second that you also have to pre-place in a way where, again, right, what's it going to do by comparison for it to be better? Not to kind of go around and around and around and around, but at the end of the day, that's basically the situation where we're at when it comes to why, again, people aren't using the pink bottles. The only people I've seen using intoxicated bottles post-patch are people that played Clown with the yellow bottles pre-PTB. Those are literally the only people. And they're trying to play like it is pre-PTB. And admittedly, a lot of the times, it does still work, a large part because of the number change that I talked about that the developers needed to make because of how game-breaking that they were. So that's really, really good. But it's still not quite there. Right? At the end of the day, 1 second at base is so short and so pitiful that people would rather just not use the pinks. Now, are the pinks worth using with either 15%? Honestly, yeah. I think the pinks are a lot better with either 15%. I mean, that's a 50% increase to the duration. But the problem there is that you still have to take an add-on slot. So really, really think about that. When you're a Clown player, someone who's not vested, not dedicated, not intending to use both bottles together, they are thrusted onto this killer, and they are deciding how they want to make their loadout and put it together. They're having to deal with the fact that they have a yellow bottle and a pink bottle. A yellow bottle gives them 12% haste at base for 6 seconds. A pink bottle slows them down by 14% for 1 second. And they have the choice to increase their pink bottle by 2%, which is a seventh, right? That could be their one add-on choice. Or they could take the other add-on to give it a 50% increase, but it's still only half a second increase to that 14%. Or they could take an add-on to give them 3% bonus haste to their 6-second lasting yellow bottle. They could take another add-on to give them 2% haste, which is the same thing as that flask gun, ironically, but at a different tier of rarity, right? They could take the sticky soda bottle for 2% for 6 seconds, or they could take Solvent Jug for an extra 1 second to their 12%. They could take Garish Makeup Kit for an extra 2 seconds to their 6 second of 12%. So really just compare those two add-ons and really let that kind of sink in when it comes to why the intoxication bottles at base are the issue, and why that, I believe, is what needs to get adjusted. It's not the overall percentage itself, right? I know some people might be thinking, what if we keep the 1 second duration, you bump it up to 16%? You're still going to be dealing with ping issues. You're still going to be dealing with everything I talked about when it comes to the bottle swap cooldowns. You're still going to be talking about having to deal with the issue, right, when it comes to just the ratio 1-to-1 of how strong a yellow bottle is compared to a pink. It may still get you some hits where it would be good, but the overall issue, right? The overall issue is that we're trying to pull clown players away from only using the yellow bottle. So even if, say, for example, a 2% increase to the hindered potency does give you the, right, it does allow you to get the squeeze from the, get the juice from the squeeze, whereas before you squeeze, you don't get the juice. It's not worth it. It doesn't actually result or convert into anything. People aren't going to see that. You would have to have the dedicated experience to recognize that. So if you don't have that, you're just going to still think it's not worth using. Increasing the duration means that people are going to think, okay, this lasts longer. This is going to be, right, it's going to be worth using my yellow bottles and my pink bottles together. And that's going to shift us away from this yellow bottle only play style. And two, right, it would also probably encourage more people to take either 15%. Because if they're able to, say, for example, take their 1.5 second pink bottle, if it were increased by half a second, which is what I do think they should do as a change here, and they were to take that with either 15% up to 2 seconds, that's basically doubling the duration of what it would currently be at this moment. And really think about that with regard to how that might encourage more clown players to use the pink bottles in turn. Because again, right, it's a matter of that short duration being the problem. And I haven't even talked about Vigil, I think, is what's crazy enough. You know, I'm over here talking about how it's hard to really do anything with the pink bottles because of the short duration and ping, right? And why does ping matter? I know I've brought up ping a few times. I don't think I've actually really gone in depth on that. The reason why ping is so important when it comes to Clown's pink bottles is that if you throw a pink bottle, let's say close enough to a window to where a survivor should be hindered and thus forced into a medium vault, right, when they vault the window, ping can result in the survivor getting a fast vault while they are intoxicated. So really think about that. You spend all of this time getting a setup, you put a pink by a window, hoping that the survivor is going to be forced into a medium vault, and thus the extended time vaulting, the extended hitbox from the medium vault itself, coupled with you closing up on them, resulting in the hit. Now you don't get the hit because they fast vault, you waste a bottle, you jail yourself probably within the tile itself because you're going to be out of position to rotate around and convert if they chain the tile of going further into the chase, right? That is ultimately a really big problem, which again stems from the fact that Clown's pink bottles only last 1 second at base. I want to also too shed some time talking about, because I've talked about swapping bottles and the cooldown there. This is a result to the change to input buffering. Now, I've talked to some people and they've informed me that this has apparently been in place for a long time. I personally did not know this. I thought that the time on swapping bottles had nothing to do itself with the bottle throw cooldown, but apparently that is the case. So what I'm saying here is that, let's say, for example, you use a yellow bottle and now you want to combine it with a pink bottle. When you throw your yellow bottle and Clown retracts his blade, you are not able to swap from your yellow to your pink until he is otherwise able to swing again or throw again or do any type of action. This bottle throw cooldown, in essence, dictates your ability to swap bottles. So really think about that. Personally, I don't like this as a healthy change, or I don't consider this a healthy change. I think this is actually very bad as well with respect to, again, encouraging clown players to use both bottles. Because again, think about this, right? In order to get past this problem right now where we're at in the current iteration of the game, you have to give up an add-on slot taking Feather. And I don't even know if taking one Feather add-on is enough. You might need to take both. And who the hell wants to take 2 Feather add-ons just so they can reliably use their yellow and pink bottles together, right? That's not even taking into account that the numbers themselves are so important to getting those hits. So by virtue of taking both feathers, you may not have the numbers to get the hit to begin with. And thus, your squeeze not getting any juice. You get what I mean? So I don't really like this, and that is something that I do kind of want to call out, at least when it comes to being a cause of the problem. Since many clown players, again, not only the pink bottle being so weak, but it's like they can't even get it out. I literally, y'all, I've watched streamers, right? I don't exactly want to name drop, but I mean, you probably could imagine who I might be watching, you know? And literally what's so funny is I watch them using their yellow and pink bottles together, and they're literally like, why can't I swap my bottle? Y'all, I pressed the button to swap my bottle. Why is the bottle not swapping? You know why it wasn't swapping, gang? Bottle throw cooldown. And it's not really dictated, it's not really clear, and I'll be honest, I think it's actually worse by comparison to pre-PTB, because it sure as hell feels slower, even if it is intrinsically tied to the cooldown itself. That is why I felt like I didn't really think it was pre-PTB, but I digress. The whole point being is that it's very sluggish trying to swap your bottles. Thus, when you factor in everything else, why the hell would anyone want to do that? Now, I think, again, this is already... No, we haven't talked about my actual solutions yet. So let's go ahead now and talk about how I would, fix these changes going forward, both when it comes to the yellow bottles and the pink bottles themselves. So looking first at Clown's yellow bottles, I believe they should take half a second longer to activate. So instead of them taking effect 1 second after being thrown and hitting a surface, it now takes 1.5 seconds for that to happen. And this is going to be basically 50% slower from where it currently is. It would be half a second faster from where it was before the PTB and before this live change. And I feel like this change, again, would be good if they were to do this, both for discouraging that yellow bottle spam playstyle, but also, honestly, for encouraging yellow and pink bottle combos together. It would allow clown players to be more aggressive with their placement. One of the issues with a 1 second activation timer when you are using yellow and pink bottles together is that you can't really throw them aggressively. You can't throw them near where a survivor currently is and then intend to rotate into it while it was inactive as they're on it to push them away from it while it's inactive, thus pick it up while you're on it and push they're not going to be able to reach it as you rotate and do all this like really crazy momentum stuff. Everything really like the cornerstone when it comes to some of the really high level setups and stuff that I both talk about and demonstrate. All of that in some ways does depend on the activation timer. You can still do a lot of it, with the 1 second timer. And, I don't want to like get off topic and digress, but the point being is that this does help, I think, with yellow and pink bottle combos, even though one might figure that a longer timer would make it harder to do that. Even though it is a 50% increase to that timer, if you played Clown before this change when it was 2 seconds, you very well knew how to adapt to that. And I think, if anything, this would be a very good middle ground. It would mean that for many Clown players, you can't necessarily just throw the yellow bottles directly on your feet to get the haste. You do kind of need to think a little bit, especially if you are actively engaged like around a tile. You know what I mean? You can't just like throw the bottle at your feet and then rotate away with it possibly before it activates. Your cheeks might not be in range of it, gang. I talk about how it's the cheeks to get the tail into the cloud. Well, 50% increase on that timer, you probably can't make that happen. I think that'd be, again, good middle ground there. Now, when it comes to the pink bottles, I already kind of talked about this earlier in the video a few minutes ago, so not to kind of get off track here, to kind of over-repeat myself. So I'm just kind of summarize this little section of the video based off of what I already talked about. And yeah, the reason why Clown's pink bottles aren't being used by many Clown players at all, especially not the ones who were using yellow bottles pre-PTB, is that they just last too short. You factor in ping, you factor in vigil, all of these things, right? The bottle swapping cooldown, it makes it to where is pink bottles just more often than not for the average to low-level Clown player. It's just not really going to convert to anything. It's not going to feel good to use. And that is why I feel like if if you increase the duration by half a second at Basekit. You don't touch the hindered percentage. I think it's fine at 14%. You will see more clown players swapping to their pink bottles, and that is because they will feel like they're worth using. You know, it's not just so much about the effect of the slowdown percentage. It's about forcing those medium vaults. You know, there are times where, because it only lasts 1 second, where you don't enable that to happen by slowing down survivors with your pinks, and thus that's why clown players just aren't using it. Either 15% on its own is not a solution, even though that is in the game as we speak. Many clown players are not going to want to take an add-on slot just so they can start using their pink bottles when they are already mid to low casual level and they didn't plan on, you know, really doing that to begin with. They would rather just take add-ons that would be more effective for boosting their yellows because of the current activation timer. So that is why I believe you'd increase it half a second at base, and that would overall fix that issue of pink bottles never being used at all. Now, there is one other thing I want to talk about here, one other little topic. I've seen this floated around in some spaces on social media. I actually had some people reach out to me in the program, right? When it came to clown solutions, I had someone ask me what I thought about independent inventories on clown and whether or not this would be a healthy change. And I'll be very forward about this, y'all. I'm gonna tell them just like I told that person, y'all. Very bad. Very bad. One of the worst things you could do to clown, and I want to be very clear about this. One of the worst things you can do is if you split the inventories. If you give clown to where he has to, let's say he has a separate number of yellows that he has pinks. This means he now has to manage both inventories. It means that when it comes to doing setups in his combos, it's going to be a lot difficult because you might not possibly have yellow bottles and your pink bottles together. And this in turn is going to feel worse, right? When you are playing clown, you will not enjoy this at some point. The only way this would feel good is if you quite literally, right, gave clown so many bottles that it was just overbearingly oppressive. Because here's the reality, gang. Let's talk about clown right now, right? Where clown is at the moment with everything we've talked about with the weaknesses of the pinks, the issue when it comes to why clowns are not using their pink bottles has nothing to do with the bottle count. You could literally give clown 20 pink bottles as they are right now. Give him 100. And I guarantee you the majority of clown players will still not use them. Why? Because they're wasting their fucking time as far as they're concerned. They're going to be swapping to these pinks. They may, again, give them 1,000 pink bottles and they never have to reload. They will still never use them if they're only a 1 second duration for 14%. Because at the end of the day, it's not going to stop them from reaching pallets. At the end of the day, it's not going to stop them from reaching windows. Because again, it's going to expire so quickly, right, gang? You're going to still get that fastball. At the end of the day, the problem is the fact that the pinks themselves are so weak. That is why we are not seeing clowns using yellows and pinks together. And the way that I feel like some people would take this direction of splitting the inventories is they would do something like, let's say clown has 4 yellow bottles and 4 pink bottles. That means that while he would technically have 8 bottles, he still has less bottles overall to be utilized in a creative way, right? You may sometimes, as it is right now, need to use 5 bottles. You may need to use 2 or 3 pink bottles, right? And then 2 to 3 yellows. And the whole point is that that is kind of where, when it comes to the complexity of clown, that is kind of where it is balanced. And in order for this to ultimately be not a nerf in that way, is if you would have to give clown, let's say like 5 to 6. You would have to give him such a ridiculous number of yellows and pinks, because otherwise what would happen is you would create a situation where clown, because his bottles are not used in a 1-to-1 ratio, you have some yellow bottles but not enough pinks. You have some pinks but not enough yellows. And this is why it would not be fun. Because think about this, gang. In order to prevent that issue mid-chase, you're going to be constantly having to juggle, no pun intended, how many yellow bottles do I have? How many pink bottles do I have? How many yellow bottles do I need to use here? Do I need to use pink bottles here? Am I able to do this without needing to reload because I may not have enough pink bottles or yellows for the follow-up? Maybe I now need to reload sooner because otherwise I would not have the setup that I need because I would be out of yellow bottles if I try to commit to the setup with the current yellow bottles that I have or with the pinks, etc., right? This is frustrating. No one wants to deal with this as a clown player. It's going to be a curse versus a blessing. You know, that is why I believe, like, you would not want this change to come into effect. It would be very, very bad, very, very unfun. And when you also look at the way that I talked about, in order for it to happen in a healthy way, where you would have to give Clown an obscene number of bottles to where this issue would be less effectual, right? In order for this situation to be less common for playing Clown with a split inventories to where you're not having an issue mid-chase, Clown would need to have like 10 to 12 bottles. That means he's like going to have so many bottles that maybe the survivors themselves have issue tracking it, how many bottles Clown has, and it just feels like he's more spammy than he was as he currently is, right? Because he's throwing so many yellows, he's throwing so many pinks. That's why I don't think it's a good change. That is why I think I would sooner see, y'all, I would literally rather see anything else happen to Clown than them split the inventories. That is how fucking bad that it is, right? Like, they literally, like, the only way where splitting the inventories would probably, like, just literally just be so ineffectual to Clown is if you already put him so far into the dumpster like he was in the PTB, where he was already just kicking pallets to begin with. Because sure, if you're already resorting him to bot tier status, then maybe splitting the inventories doesn't matter because it's already like your killer experience is so negligible that who really gives a shit, right? Just saying, gang, that's again just my opinion. Splitting the inventories, very, very bad. Because again, it's not about the fact that Clown doesn't have enough pink bottles to combo him with his yellows. You give them 100 bottles, he's not going to use them. The problem is that the pink bottles aren't worth using. You split the inventories when the bottles aren't used in a 1-to-1 ratio, you're going to create a frustrating experience for the Clown player mid-chase, right? And again, final comment on that, you're not going to make things more fun for the survivors themselves too. So that's everything. I feel like I kind of, you know, I don't want to repeat myself, go around belabor. You know, we've talked about all my thoughts here. Last thing I want to do with this video is I do have one little match for you guys. I want to kind of show y'all just some gameplay, me playing with the chase build and, you know, using yellow and pink bottles just to kind of show how the state of Clown currently is on the I was about to say on the PTB on live servers. And other than that, you know, give a little thoughts afterward and we'll wrap things up. Fractured Cowshed. Okay. Probably good for ridiculous. This can kick it from this angle. Let's get out the way. Can't really play that without Q. This guy and reload. This is not looking like a good match start already, but I can tell you that. I'll go check Shad, but is this another match where I move slower? No, I think we're fine. Okay, well that's gonna cost me the chase there. Holy shit. And I'm lagging. I'm lagging, so I don't know what the fuck she's gonna vault or what. Okay. Oh. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, dude. I'm kind of missing Thick Court Stopper, believe it or not. Probably 2 gens here, though. That's first. Second one should be coming in pretty soon. That gen's also about 50%. So if we do hit 3, we're technically at 2.5. This is technically Obsession. Oh, they did the other gen. Oh, I don't have any more bottles. Bro, you were actually a mad lad. Like, how did you think I was gonna rotate that? Did she think that I thought she was playing window? Probably. She must have thought that I thought she was playing window. Zad would definitely make sense. I think I get this, right? Pink slowdown? No? Doesn't matter? Thank you. Hey, Killer Street. Should be hitting 2 gens before I start my next chase, by the way. Oh look, they have objects. Interesting. Remember, I did say we'd hit 2 before we start our next chase. I think the higher sensitivity is definitely helping, FYI. Yeah, I have an angle for this. Right over here. Two people stab us. Oh wow. She got instantly picked up somehow. Oh, okay. Just gonna kick this and rotate, I guess. Did they actually leave? They did. Fucking crazy, dude. I really wish that I had stronger pinks. I know you kicked this, but hold on. Or did she leave? You know, if I had 1% stronger pinks, she dies there. Crazy. Whatever, man. That's even with either 15%, by the way. Well, my chance of winning the game is completely gone now. Crazy. By the way, I hit that pre-patch. Regardless of the fact that the yellows are stronger at the moment with Basekit because of the influence of those pinks, I do hit that. Comparatively. She shouldn't have influence. I introduce you to save the best for last. already been slugged for a while, the other one hasn't. I'll go ahead and pick up. GG's. Let's go. I don't think flip-flop would come into play here. There is no fucking way, right? Holy shit. I was actually concerned for a minute. Okay. There we go. I don't know if we've got another hook, though. Yeah, I kind of see it. I mean, that's fine. I'll just wait out my Mori. GG's. You know why I think she's crawling? I wonder if she actually has Unbreakable. Oh my. You are actually fucking kidding me. Holy shit, DVD. Thank you. Holy fuck. Wire spool and spring clamp. Well, that explains a lot. I was wondering how she didn't beat us on the Sabo. Oh, that also explains it too, because using a fucking engineer's toolbox. Yeah, she's not even using the Sabo toolbox. Right. Engineers can be heard is reduced by interesting add-ons. Okay. So before we get started, the reason why I wanted to include some footage in this video is because in addition to the rhetoric, I kind of want to demonstrate exactly what I mean when it comes to how Clown struggles in current live, right? Because again, a lot of people phrase Clown as having this S tier level of mobility, like his chase is being borderline uncounterable, etc., even around pre-drop pallets. And that's just blatantly not true. You know, especially as I've very clearly shown, you're still prone to making mistakes. Sometimes the percentage just doesn't add up. And overall, again, as long as survivors sit on generators, do what they're supposed to do, even with a full chase build, right, to have stronger chases, it doesn't actually result in Clown having stronger macro pressure as a result of that. Because there's still nothing at Basekit to slow down your generators in the early game. There's nothing to compensate for you having a slowed first hook. There's nothing to compensate for you to have the zero form of mid-game stall, right? It's only really on the survivors with respect to how they play when it comes to how well you are going to do over the course of a match in the 1v4. So sure, even though you can have play with your food, save the best for last, rapid brutality, and Zanshin, and your chase might still be half of what it would be when it comes to times of if you had a build that had less chase perks, well, those builds are still going to have greater macro pressure by virtue of the slowdown, right? Even though your chase may still be half the time, that's irrespective to a survivor's ability to two-man a generator without a toolbox, with a toolbox getting it done in the same level of time, right? Whereas they otherwise wouldn't be able to do that if you had a perk like Dead Man Switch. It wouldn't be nearly as effective if you had applied multiple forms of instant regression over the course of a period of time, right? With Pain Resonance, Pop Goes the Weasel, Eruption, Jolt, etc., right? So even though these builds are fun, and they feel great to use in chase, you don't ultimately really win your matches using a build like these, especially on a killer like Clown due to his weaknesses. And that is what I kind of wanted to show here, because ultimately in this match, the reason why I did lose, right? Let's kind of talk about what happened here. The result of this match was basically from the survivors just giving me the win. You know, going for looking at the very beginning, I started off kind of having some problems getting my first down. We were able to get Cow Tree out of the way early, but ultimately, what did that really do for me? Not really much. They still had a whole lot of pallets to work with on the other side of the map. We didn't really catch anybody else out, I believe, in dead zones in that area, probably because they knew not to go there. And that's basically the whole point. You know, we got rid of some troublesome pallets, but by the time that we did, we still lost 2 generators first chase. They still were able to get another generator done before I was able to get my 3rd hook, right? They took me to the corner of the map when that was my only pressure that I had when it comes to macro, because that was where I got my first hook, right? They unhooked the survivor. They then went to the corner, so if I wanted to get the most efficient form of chasing done, I was then away from every other generator. They capitalized on that, and then while I was doing so, they finished the generators with free reign outside of my peripheral, outside of my ability to pressure. And that's my whole point. That's why Clown is mid-tier. That's not why Clown is S-tier. That is why even with my faster chases, even with me playing very well, I almost lost this game, and I thought I was bound to lose the game. I didn't expect the survivors to run at me 3-man at the end when it was a 1v3 and then just give me the win. Maybe they didn't really care at that point. Maybe they were just really willing to wrap things up. They probably were just more here for bully shenanigans, if you call it that, to begin with, right? They had, what was it, the Arella with Sabo in addition to everything else. So that's kind of my whole point, right? But the purpose of this match was to just showcase the chasing. I felt like I played Clown very well this match. I used my yellows and my pinks even together very well. But ultimately, there was a chase where it just didn't matter. I was chasing the Arella at no, it was an Ada, excuse me. I was chasing the Ada at one of the long walls, and I couldn't get the hit simply because of the state of Clown's pink bottles. Now, I think I did mention that I felt like if my pink was 1% stronger that I would have gotten a hit. That was only following a rotation where the pink bottle expired too soon in order for me to refresh the pink. Because since it expired too soon, she was outside the range of my second pink that I threw before it hit the ground, and thus she wasn't intoxicated before I could catch her before she made it back to the pallet. So if she did have a longer hinder duration, even with the current pink hinder percentage being what it is, it would have been refreshed from my second pink, and I would have gotten that hit. I was still using either 15%, but if anything, because of that, it would demonstrate why if you were to buff the pink bottle by half a second at Basekit, how much of an impact that would have on helping Clown, right? But I also think it would show too where, in addition to helping Clown both like outside of that in other situations, it would mean that if I had either 15%, like I did in this chase, with a Basekit hindrance duration buff, I would be able to catch her, right? That's basically what I'm getting at. The whole bottom line that what I'm trying to explain here with this chase and just kind of how things played out in general in this match with my yellow and my pink bottles is that even with me currently committing with either 15%, I'm still coming up short. And so it's like, even though I'm going out of my way to do the thing that I was talking about that people with experience might be able to get more out of, still, even for me, I'm coming up short. That is why I believe the problem lies in the overall duration of Clown's pink bottles. But, otherwise, I think that does wrap up what can be really gained from this match. They played very well. They did what they needed to in macro. I had some pretty good micro. I still made some mistakes because mistakes happen, and that's kind of, one of the things I do like to showcase in the point of my matches here, right, is to show what happens when you have a good match, but you still make what I believe to be a reasonable level of human error. When you consider that Survivor is all about making mistakes by definition, that's what hook states and health states are about, right? Or getting punished for mistakes and being able to have something to work with as you work through those mistakes. That is kind of why I think it's okay to especially showcase matches where as Killer you have mistakes. But, obviously the only real difference between Killer and Survivor is that you aren't really afforded the same leniency for making mistakes as you are when you Killer versus Survivor, but I digress. But I do think that just about wraps everything up. I hope you all really do like everything I did talk about with respect to this video and the changes for Clown, things that would make him healthier. I do think Clown is fine where he is. I do see the problems that do exist within the game, and that is why I'm making this, because if we are going to still make some changes, these are just the changes, right, that I feel would make him healthier. It's really just at the end of the day, It's about making Clown fun to play against, but also still fun to play too, right, gang? You can't just Skull Merchant him and put him into the dumpster, because at the end of the day, the more killers you do that to, the more killers play Nurse, Blight, and Ghoul. So hope you all really like this video. If you're interested in learning more, I have a very detailed clown guide. I'll be sure to link in the description. It is mostly accurate. Mostly, I will say there are still some setups that are probably not nearly as practical, but the principle still holds true. Just keep practicing and doing what you can, and you will still be able to accomplish very, very similar levels of synergy and comboing between the yellow and pink bottles. But again, right, I do understand how hard the pink bottles are to use at the current moment. I do stream live on Twitch during the weekdays. If you're interested in watching live gameplay, that is where this match came from. And again, y'all, I do kind of want to like touch on very briefly. I know I haven't been around as much. DBD has been very frustrating for me to play, both on stream and even just thinking about in general. It's also where the lack of the videos overall have been kind of where they've been. Why I haven't been posting as much, because DBD just hasn't been fun to play, gang. It's not as much due to the game itself. Part of it is due to the lack of comeback mechanics, the lack of support for human error that Killer has compared to Survivor. But a larger part than that has just also been just the overall general Survivor toxicity. Like, quite literally, gang, I genuinely find myself not even wanting to get on this game because I'm so sick of the people that I go against. And it's not how they play, it's how they act. Maybe it's me showing my age here, gang, but I'm past the age of just dealing with people being assholes and just overall like immaturity, right? It's very frustrating when I'm playing a game that already punishes me for my mistakes in a very severe manner, and I hold myself accountable to that. And then I have to deal with what feels like the little sibling side of the player base, the small children that criticize and undermine and demean for these normal rational mistakes that a human makes playing Killer, when again they don't experience that. The experience is night and day, Survivor to Killer, and they pretty much just take advantage of that to make the other side feel worse. It's like literally punching down in the most like ridiculous manner when you consider it's not punching down through skill, it's just punching down through the game being designed in a way to, again, right, cater to people that ultimately just probably aren't as capable. But I digress, y'all. That's a whole other topic for a different video. I just kind of wanted to kind of explain that, right? I didn't want to take too much time out of the conclusion. I did want to, you know what I mean, gang? I did still want to give y'all that context. But if you do like this video, I'd really appreciate it regardless if you would like and subscribe. Not just for yourself, so you know when I post new videos, but also because it really helps me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm, especially commenting. It pushes my videos to more people, which means my thoughts get out there to more help talk about the game and teach people about it. And it's one of the things I really like about making videos is specifically that. So other than that, I hope y'all really enjoyed this video, and I'll see y'all next time. Later, gang.